Hello, good morning and welcome. It is Tuesday, November the 4th. This morning, Rachel Reeves and Kemi Badenoch go head to head. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. Welcome to Politics at Sam and Anne, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know for the day ahead in British politics in around 20 minutes.
And this morning, the Chancellor's taken a leaf out of our book, Sam. Do something early in order to get noticed. Well, at least that's the plan. It's an 8 a.m. speech in Downing Street from Rachel Reeves because they are desperate, their own words, to get the public watching the speech to pitch roll for the budget. And the Chancellor will echo a lot of what Keir Starmer told the Parliamentary Labour Party last night. And he said the following: the long-term impact of Tory austerity, the botched Brexit deal, the pandemic, all taken together, Britain's productivity is worse than we feared. By implication, I think we know that the big T tax word is looming.
Right. So that's quite the morning. Just before we dive back into all matters budget, which of course is this podcast's happy place, there's just a couple of things to mention. It's Tuesday, so it's the YouGov Sky News Times weekly voting intention poll. This has Reform, as ever, at the moment, out in front on 27th. That's no change on the week. You've got the Labour Party. They're back up 3 percentage points on 20. That's a more typical figure after that unusual drop last week, suggesting that was just noise. Then you have got the Conservative Party on 16 and the Greens on 16. So the Greens equal to the Conservatives, and the Liberal Democrats on 15.
Well, talking of the Greens, Zach Polanski will be speaking at a Green Alliance conference, leaders from politics, business, etc. He'll be making the case for rebuilding that cross-party consensus on the environment, whatever happened to that, just ahead of the COP30 climate summit. He will say that the right has framed climate as an elite concern. It's actually the beating heart of fairness, health and security. So there's a bit of take back control of the climate agenda there coming from Zach Polanski. And we will have more on the PM's trip to COP to follow up on that tomorrow.
We certainly will. One more thing, indulge me. If you can flick onto Sky News today, me and producer Joe Cook have done a big deep dive into what's going on with government and AI beyond the headlines. You can't have escaped Keir Starmer talking up the big claims he makes about AI, which will solve public service dilemmas, deal with the cost of living crisis, and sort out the jobs conundrum. But we wanted to know how and what they're doing. So we've crunched the numbers when it comes to government contracts on AI and explained what is, and critically, and what isn't happening. We've also interviewed the UK boss of Palantir, so please do tune in for that.
You have been duly indulged. It will be fascinating, so do take a look at that. Right, it's back to the budget. 22 days to go. It's not normal for a Chancellor to be giving a speech, let alone with such razzmatazz and early morning television, at this point in the cycle about what is going to be in it in 3 weeks' time. Do you remember the days when they came and just dropped from the heavens? Interesting what we think is going on there in terms of the form and function of why Rachel Reeves is choosing to do this in such a dramatic way right now. I mean, is she stealing her own thunder here, Sam?
I think there's been a change of approach in budgets ever since Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng gave the mini budget, which shocked the market and ultimately slung her out of office. Budgets aren't now dropped from the sky in the way that they used to. But very specifically, what are they thinking inside the Treasury? Well, a week ago, Anne, we had a discussion about the fact that it was unclear to me, really, if we're being honest, that there was a democratic mandate for the scale of tax rises that are approaching in the budget. And also that I could not see that the public were at all prepared for what was about to hit. Okay. Now, at the time, to my surprise, the Treasury accepted that the public weren't ready. But they accepted that accusation because they knew that today's speech was coming, because they think that today will answer that challenge, that they can credibly claim this is a big part of informing the public. They are desperate for everyone to hear what Rachel Reeves says today. So even though we've been reporting for weeks what's coming, and Rachel Reeves explicitly told me in that interview last month that tax rises are on the agenda, they want to hammer that point home. There's no new policy in this speech. I am told they expect tax rises are to come, says Chancellor, to be the biggest headline of all. But it's about informing the public and trying to tell people beyond the SW1 bubble what is going to come on November the 26th.
So we're being slightly softened up. I'm not sure we're being softened up or beaten up. It's actually judge the tone on that, isn't it? Because in one way, if you sort of say, beware, this is going to be the most, I have to do this, it's going to be the most terrible experience, or do you just try to sort of calm down the expectations? But let's take a look at Rachel Reeves and we could report back on that. Not to be outdone, Kemi Badenoch will have her go at 10 o'clock. In her speech, she is going to slam Labour. Having given up, she will say, on trying to reduce the welfare bill, seizing on claims that early drafts of the Stephen Timms review didn't identify any savings, despite Keir Starmer saying the bill was unsustainable. And the Tory leader will argue that it's a weakness of Reeves and Starmer that is to blame for the bill here and for those disability benefit and PIP costs continuing to rise at a significant speed under Labour. I doubt we'll hear terribly much about that from the Chancellor.
Of course not. Kemi Badenoch will also, in the speech at 10 o'clock, call out reform for what she says is their complicity in this welfare addiction, stating that no party that commits to lifting the two-child benefit cap can be serious about reducing public expenditure when they want the taxpayer to foot the bill for a massive increase in welfare spending. The whole point of Nigel Farage's big moment yesterday was to try and pare back on the accusation that Reform UK might end up being a big spending party. There is a little bit of kind of Nigel Farage dotting around the political spectrum here. And I was at that speech, and I asked him whether there wasn't a bit too much shape-shifting going on from him.
You are the master of political reinvention. I mean, we've had Brexit Nigel and trade union Nigel and small state Nigel and nationalisation Nigel. They line up like Barbies on a toy shelf. Today we've got fiscal responsibility Nigel. Why should we trust that this Nigel Farage survives to and beyond the next general election?
I haven't jettisoned anything. I believe in pretty much the same sort of things I believed in 30 years ago. I believe we have to have a hard work culture in this country. And I believe that unless business succeeds, the rest of the country can't succeed. A growing public sector does not make us richer. I think I've believed in that for almost 50 years, actually.
Nigel Farage is a Barbie doll, an image which will not shift easily from the mind over our morning toast. I think there's been a whole, switch the metaphor, but like a Matryoshka set going on between Nigel Farage there and Richard Tice, obviously taking up that mantle of prospective Chancellor if there were to be a Nigel Farage-led government. When the dust settles over so many proposals were spun into the debate yesterday as Reform had its big day on the economy, the ones that stuck with me anyway were the plan to water down the original two-child benefit cap policy. He blamed it on misunderstandings. Good to know that Reform still does the same old language when it's talked itself into something that a party needs to quickly get out of, and said it would only be lifted for families where both parents were working. Interesting how far we get any hint from Rachel Reeves on how she reads the way to do a reversal of that cap of her own. My colleague Dan Bloom has a line today from his interview with Richard Tice. Got a tranche of that today, Sam, on something else. It's a bit in the weeds, but I think it underpins a lot of economic thinking for Reform, which is the mandate of the Bank of England. Now, there's been a lot of abolition talk on the right, including in the interview that I did with Liz Truss recently. Get rid of it. This is nonsense. We've got to take back political control. But it's intriguing to me that Richard Tice says, well, have we got the membership right? Have we got the number of government representatives right? I think he means people who are sort of seen as close to government there, etc. He's much more hedged on it. It's the sort of thing that more traditional parties do when they want to downplay expectations of big change. So as much as people always look for the drama of Reform, what I saw was a lot of stealthily backing out of previous commitments or the appearance of them.
Right. Let's get down to what Rachel Reeves is saying. And we've been given some of her words. Do you want to just tell us what she's expected to say?
Yeah, Rachel Reeves will say she will make choices necessary to deliver strong foundations for our economy this year and for years to come. It will be a budget led by the government's values of fairness and opportunity, focused squarely on the priorities of the British people. And here they come, protecting our NHS, reducing our national debt, and improving the cost of living. That sort of triptych will not be a surprise to Sam Coates, because I think you predicted exactly that a couple of days ago.
It was on the podcast yesterday. So this is a speech of two halves. First of all, the Chancellor is going to say why things are rubbish and she needs to put up taxes. And then she's going to set out her priorities and what she's going to try and protect. So let's deal with the first half first, Anne. Do you want to just talk about the government case for why it needs to do something that less than a year ago it said it wouldn't have to do?
I think it just feels it needs to do it on the raw numbers, and as much as there is some wriggle-roo about the interpretation and also the what they're going to get in those last OBR forecasts before the budget, there clearly is a problem with delivering on the kind of fiscal strictures that they laid out a year ago. And that's now so openly admitted behind the scenes in Cabinet. And you and I, Sam, have hear quite a lot about this from other Cabinet folk and their representatives who've just been quite worried about it. So I see this as the seize back the megaphone moment for the Chancellor. She has been embattled on this, and she needs to control the narrative rather than be seen as kind of trying to do a Houdini number on budget day. That probably would not work for her. Some chancellors just go for it, don't they? They keep everything as much under wraps as possible, and then on the day, shock and awe. I think that is not possible in the situation in which Reeves finds herself. So she'll focus on a number of things, avoiding that kind of shock syndrome, but also on the fact that the rising cost of borrowing, she will say, has blown a hole in the coffers. The excuses will come thick and fast. There'll be international headwinds. There'll be botched Brexit. These lines are being rolled out fairly persistently now. And there will be warnings about the bigger than expected downgrade to productivity forecasts. That's the one I am least convinced about, because I wonder whether we are being perhaps told post-Halloween to be afraid, be very afraid, and then find out that actually behind the mask it's not quite as bad as we were being briefed, and that the way we were having our expectations massaged. All in all, it's just going to be a big bag of old kind of economic refuse dumped on the Tories' door, saying, these are the people who did this to you.
I suppose that's the point on which I want us to just pause for a second, laying all the blame at the door of the Tories. Last week I gave you kind of how the black hole that Rachel Reeves is going to have to fill, what it's made up of. So I just thought we could run through that again and assess how much of that is actually laid at the Tories' door. Right. So I think that there is a black hole of about 30 to 40 billion pounds that she's going to have to deal with. 10 billion of which is to pay for the welfare U-turns, the winter fuel allowance, the welfare, the PIP U-turns, and the fuel duty freeze rollover, policy decisions that she's decided to make as a result of what the government wants to do. That 10 billion cannot really be laid at the Tories' door. Another 10 billion is the forecast direct downgrade that you just mentioned. So that's 20 billion black hole because of future lower productivity, but that's offset by an upgrade to wage growth. So that's still about 10 billion. That's probably the most uncertain. That could improve if the forecasts get a little bit better. But a lot of that is down to the global trade war that Donald Trump started. Again, not something that could really be put at the door of the Tories. At 2 to 4 billion, that's debt interest costs. Some of that's because of higher costs of borrowing, because the Tories did borrow a lot, but some of that is because the cost of borrowing went up since she came in. And then another 5 billion is, well, that's roughly the amount that she's choosing to spend at this budget, lifting the 2-child cap, spending for help on energy bills, and probably more help for the NHS England on redundancy payments. And then she's going to need more headroom because she didn't have enough a year ago. That's another 10 billion. So an awful lot of the 30-odd billion pound black hole is simply not a consequence of Tory decisions. It just factually just doesn't seem to be accurate to me.
So if that's the problem, what is she promising to protect here?
Well, I've had briefings on each of what each of those three areas, reducing debt, the NHS, and help with the cost of living, actually mean in practice. Let's just do reducing debt. She says that she wants to reduce our national debt. Now, I just want to channel my inner Fraser Nelson because, of course, she says those words, but she's not actually going to be reducing debt. Her fiscal rules mean that she is going to be reducing debt only as a percentage of GDP. And it's also not all debt that is going to be reducing because her fiscal rules only measure net financial debt. So some things are excluded. And the OBR felt that the UK had comfortably met this rule a year ago. So reducing debt, we are not going to be borrowing. So you have to asterisk the Chancellor when she talks about reducing debt.
Right. How do you think that's going to play out then? Because in one way, you're setting off, I think the whole idea of doing this so early is so that the markets have got like the whole day to respond to it. But the question is whether that sounds like it's a reassuring approach or whether it is also just going to shine a light on the fact, that this debt has continued to remain so high. It is partly about the way and the tone in which Rachel Reeves is going to address it, isn't it?
It is. She's continuing a slight sort of linguistic trick that successive chancellors have used, but it's a reflection of the fact that actually Britain's fiscal position is just not very good. Let's just dive into the second thing that's one of her priorities that she says she's going to do, and that is protecting the NHS. Again, that isn't quite what it seems. If you hear talk of her protecting the NHS, you might think that that means that we're going to get a big upgrade in money for things like waiting lists at this budget. I'm not sure that's true. I am told that when she talks about protecting the NHS, she is wanting to get credit for last year's big £22 billion increase in the NHS budget. She is not justifying more spending this year. Very explicitly, I'm told she's simply making a political argument about the need not to U-turn on the existing NHS investment. Because if the NHS does get money this year, it's for redundancies and strike cover and increasing drug bills, not frontline services.
That is a really tricky message to say, you should be grateful that I gave you this money last year and I didn't take it away from you. I must try that on my children when they come to ask for greater allowances. Yeah, you should be lucky I didn't take away what I gave you, your father and I gave you last year. That is, I'm almost quite surprised by that. I suppose there is the underlying argument that I've heard from senior NHS leaders who've been involved also in focus grouping and pushing their argument with the Treasury that if you're going to have some form of income tax rise in some constellation via tax, NI rises, etc., saying to people that this is going to the NHS still does test well for Labour, even times when people are clearly very, very annoyed with Labour and have low trust in Keir Starmer and his project, that does test reasonably well and it allows them to take the fight to reform where Nigel Farage has been talking about insurance systems and possible alternatives. All true. But as you rightly say there, if the message here is not so you will see the impact of this, we're going to go a bit further, we're going to bring down those waiting lists even faster. It's not going to frontline services, and a lot of it is going, and I still think there is very unfortunate meat on the bone when it comes to the amount of money that is going to be needed to pay off redundancies from that wholesale abolition of NHS England. That doesn't quite sound like it is what the voters mean when they think instinctively about investing in the NHS. And I was actually talking with a very senior civil servant last night. He said you still have to make an argument that Labour has not made about why it was so essential to do this, such that it cost you money to get these people out of the door, and what have you gained by it?
That's all tricky. Final thing, she will talk about the cost of living and helping with the cost of living. And CPI inflation was 4.1%. That's over double the target for the Bank of England. So this is a very tricky area as well. Again, this isn't a promise of mega help in the tens of billions. She's going to refer back to breakfast clubs and other things that they've done. But there is clearly something coming on energy, which will cost a small number of billions. But they're very keen to draw a line between that and what they describe as the Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak scale of help that you saw that racked up so much debt. So they're cautioning away from tens of billions of help, but still that sounds like it's in the low billions, probably for energy, possibly for food. But of course, inflation, well, part of that has risen because of last year's national insurance rise, according to economists.
Inflation's not out of the system, is it? In any meaningful way, in fairness to Reeves, she has that in common with a lot of other European leaders who are finding that when they came in to power a year or thereabouts or so, that they were banking on it coming down a lot faster. Again, the cost of living message. If you want to say to people that this is what we're trying to do, are you still doing a variant on the Rishi Sunak? If you stick with our plan, inflation will come down and then things will get a bit better for you. Or do you have to argue that here and there, you've cited a few of those things in your answer, that you're able, if you like, to take the edge off and mitigate it? At the moment, you don't see the government being able to say, cost of living, we know it's an issue, and here's one big bazooka that we can wield against it. It still feels like step by step, gradual, bring down inflation. Oh, echoes of Rishi Sunak. I think he might be allowing himself a quiet smile when he hears Rachel Reeves this morning.
Once upon a time, it was known as the British disease. Do you know what the podcaster's disease is, Anne?
Talking.
Yes, inflation in terms of the number of minutes we take because we have bust through our 20-minute limit. And we must battle word inflation on this podcast and bring it to an end. We'll see you tomorrow for Politics at Sam and Anne on a Wednesday to digest all of that and talk about COP. It's the last one of the week for us because recess is on Thursday, but we'll see you then.
See you tomorrow.
Hey, it's Sophie and Will from Sky News.
Too many headlines, too little time?
We get it, and that's why we're bringing you Cheat Sheet.
10 minutes every weekday morning.
All the big stories from politics to pop culture, minus the noise.
No doom scrolling, no spin, just the stories that matter from two people who live and breathe the news. Cheat Sheet with Ridge and Frost from Sky News.
Follow Cheat Sheet wherever you get your podcasts.